Emma had been carrying the laundry up the stairs, thinking about the quietness of the house, how Jake had become more distant lately, spending hours in his room, headphones on, scrolling through his phone, lost in his own world. She loved her stepson deeply, yet she missed the small moments they used to share, laughing over breakfast or joking in the kitchen. It was Sunday, the kind of lazy afternoon where the sunlight spilled through the windows and made everything seem golden and calm, but Emma felt a strange tension in her chest, a restless feeling she couldn't explain. As she reached the top of the stairs, she noticed Jake's bedroom door slightly open, just a crack, and a sudden impulse urged her to peek in, a desire to see him, to check on him, to connect. Normally, she would have knocked, respected his privacy, but something inside her, curiosity, worry, or maybe longing, pushed her to gently push the door. The room was quiet, the music off, and Jake was sitting on the edge of his bed, staring out the window at the late afternoon sky, a soft light falling on his face. He looked smaller somehow, more vulnerable, the way teenagers sometimes look when lost in their thoughts, and Emma felt a pang of both concern and something deeper, a warmth she couldn't quite name. Jake turned slightly at the sound of the door moving and realized she was there. His cheeks flushed, his eyes widened, and he stammered, I forgot to lock the door." Emma immediately stepped back, feeling the sudden tension, a mix of embarrassment, curiosity, and an unfamiliar fluttering in her heart. She smiled gently, trying to hide her own racing thoughts, but inside, she felt a connection she hadn't anticipated, a blend of maternal care, protective instinct, and an odd, quietly thrilling awareness of the closeness between them. She noticed the way the sunlight highlighted the curve of his shoulders, the softness in his expression, the way he seemed suddenly exposed not just physically but emotionally, and it made her pulse quicken. Emma reminded herself to breathe, to keep things proper, to remember that Jake was her stepson and that boundaries mattered, yet she couldn't deny the strange pull she felt, the emotional intensity that hung in the room like a delicate, fragile thread waiting to be tugged. She took a small step forward, asking softly, "Are you okay, Jake?" His eyes flickered toward hers, hesitant, searching, and then away, as if he were afraid of what he might feel, what he might reveal. The silence stretched, heavy and meaningful, filled with unspoken thoughts and a connection that was deeper than she had expected. Emma realized that this was more than just a simple moment of forgetting to lock a door. It was a window into Jake's world, a rare glimpse of his inner life, his uncertainties, his quiet struggles, and it touched something tender within her. She wanted to comfort him, to bridge the distance that had grown between them over the months, and yet she was acutely aware of the line that could not be crossed. The air was warm from the afternoon sun, and it seemed to wrap around them, highlighting the tension, the intimacy, the quiet thrill of human connection that sometimes surprises you in the most ordinary moments. She noticed little details she had never paid attention to before, the way his hair fell over his forehead, the gentle curve of his smile when he looked away shyly, the soft tone of his voice even in embarrassment, and it made her heart ache with something she couldn't name, a mix of love, protectiveness, and longing. She reminded herself again, firmly, that her love had to remain appropriate, that Jake was her stepson, that she had responsibilities and a family to consider, yet she also realized that human emotions are rarely neat, rarely simple, and that sometimes a single moment can shift the way we feel in ways we can't predict. She took a breath, feeling both exhilarated and anxious, aware that this fleeting, quiet encounter had stirred something deep within her, something emotional and romantic in its own subtle way, and she knew that she would remember this afternoon, this moment, for a long time. Jake fidgeted slightly, picking at the edge of the blanket, his eyes darting to hers occasionally, as if he wanted to speak but couldn't find the words, and Emma felt a strange empathy for him, a desire to understand him, to be close without crossing boundaries, to offer comfort while respecting the space between them. The sunlight shifted, casting shadows across the room, and for a few heartbeats, they simply looked at each other, caught in the quiet intimacy of family, love, and the unspoken, fragile bonds that connect people. Emma finally smiled, softly, and said, "It's okay, I just wanted to make sure you were all right," and in that simple sentence, 1,000 emotions hung in the air: relief, connection, longing, and the silent understanding that this ordinary Sunday afternoon had unexpectedly become extraordinary. And as she stepped back toward the stairs, the world outside the room seemed to hum with a new intensity, the air charged with a quiet romantic tension, an emotional undercurrent that neither she nor Jake could fully articulate, leaving both of them feeling both comforted and restless, aware that something had shifted between them, and that their relationship, though unchanged in name, had become more complicated, more heartfelt, and infinitely more alive in the fragile, tender space between. Care and longing. After that quiet, charged afternoon, Emma found herself replaying the moment in her mind over and over, unable to shake the feeling that something had subtly shifted between her and Jake. The house felt different now, alive with small, electric tension, every sound and movement amplified in her awareness. She noticed Jake more than ever, how he lingered at the doorway when she called him for dinner, how he offered to help with small chores even when he didn't need to, how he smiled at her in fleeting, almost shy ways that made her chest tighten with a mix of pride and a strange, unfamiliar fluttering. At first, she tried to dismiss it as normal affection between a stepson and a stepmother, reminding herself that boundaries mattered, that she had a family, a moral compass, and responsibilities that could not be ignored. But every interaction seemed charged now, weighted with unspoken emotion, a subtle pull she could not name or resist. One evening, while they were both in the kitchen preparing a simple dinner, Jake hesitated mid-task, his hands pausing over a cutting board, and said softly, almost in a whisper, "Emma, do you ever feel like things are different than they should be?" His question struck her in the chest, simple yet loaded with a meaning that neither of them dared fully express. She looked at him, seeing a young man caught between childhood and adulthood, curious, vulnerable, and sincere, and felt an ache of empathy and affection that made her throat tighten. She answered carefully, her voice calm but gentle, "I suppose sometimes life surprises you, Jake. Sometimes feelings are more complicated than we expect." He nodded, still unsure, eyes searching hers as if trying to understand the boundaries of what was safe, what was real, and what was allowed. The moments that followed were full of subtle, quiet intimacy, sharing stories of their day, laughing over minor mishaps, exchanging glances that lingered just a fraction too long, brushing past each other in the hallway, hands grazing briefly but leaving a spark behind. Emma could feel her heart racing in ways she hadn't felt in years, a combination of maternal care, protective instinct, and an undercurrent of something tenderly thrilling, a sense that connection could deepen in ways they weren't ready to name. Jake, in turn, seemed to lean into these moments, showing an unexpected attentiveness and emotional maturity that both impressed and unnerved her, a quiet desire to be seen, understood, and appreciated. Every interaction became a dance of restraint and longing, a careful navigation of feelings they both recognized but neither dared voice aloud. Even ordinary tasks, the passing of a dish, a shared laugh over a spilled cup, a quiet joke whispered in the kitchen, became infused with an emotional weight that made Emma's heart flutter and left Jake equally unsettled yet drawn to her. The household itself seemed to notice the change, the walls holding their laughter, the air feeling denser, almost electric, charged with anticipation and a strange romantic energy that neither could fully explain. Emma struggled internally, trying to reconcile her growing awareness of Jake as more than a stepson with the boundaries she could not cross, constantly reminding herself that her love had to be protective, nurturing, and morally sound, yet she could not deny the thrill of emotional intimacy, the way her heart beat faster when he laughed, the way a simple touch sent warmth through her chest. As days passed, these feelings intensified. She found herself planning moments to spend time with him, asking for help on trivial things, finding excuses to be near him, and noticing the way he reciprocated with subtle gestures, kind words, and gentle attentiveness. One rainy afternoon, while the house was quiet and the windows fogged with mist, Emma and Jake sat together on the sofa, talking about dreams and fears, sharing moments they hadn't spoken aloud before, and Emma felt a quiet ache of longing she didn't fully understand. She realized that what they were experiencing was a rare, delicate bond, an emotional intimacy tinged with admiration, care, and a budding awareness of attraction that had nothing to do with physicality but everything to do with hearts connecting in unexpected ways. She noticed Jake fidgeting slightly, hesitating in conversation, his eyes reflecting both vulnerability and curiosity, and it made her ache to reach out and reassure him, to comfort him, to show that he mattered deeply to her, in a way that went beyond words. She saw in him the kind of young man who needed guidance, understanding, and gentle encouragement, and she found herself drawn to provide it, feeling proud, protective, and emotionally stirred all at once. Their conversations stretched into the evenings, sometimes ending with silence that spoke louder than words, filled with meaning and unspoken awareness, each glance loaded with subtle emotions, each smile a secret shared, each touch a fleeting spark that left them both restless and thinking long after the moments passed. Emma realized she was learning more about herself too, about her capacity to feel deeply, to empathize, to connect in ways that were heartfelt and profoundly human, even when restrained by responsibility. And Jake, quietly, was discovering his own emotions, navigating admiration, respect, longing, and affection, aware of a bond that felt thrilling and safe, intimate yet proper. Every day, they continued to build this invisible bridge between them, a connection rooted in trust, understanding, and quiet emotional romance, a gentle tension that neither could fully articulate, but both recognized as powerful and moving. By the end of that week, Emma felt a mixture of exhilaration and fear, exhilaration at the closeness they shared, the tender conversations, the subtle intimacies, and fear of what these feelings could mean, how easily hearts could ache when boundaries were delicate and emotions raw. She knew that life had become richer, more complicated, and emotionally vibrant because of these small moments, and though she didn't yet know where it would lead, she understood that their connection had changed them both, opening doors to understanding, care, and affection that neither had expected, leaving their hearts restless, alive, and quietly yearning for more. And as she went to bed that night, memories of Jake's eyes, his soft voice, the shy smiles, and the warmth that seemed to linger in their shared spaces played over in her mind, a reminder that human connection could surprise you, stir emotions deeply, and create a romantic tension that was entirely about the heart, the soul, and the quiet magic of being truly seen and understood. Days turned into weeks, and the quiet, electric connection between Emma and Jake grew stronger, yet remained unspoken, a tension that neither dared name but both felt deeply in every shared glance, every brush of a hand, every fleeting moment of attention. Emma found herself noticing Jake in ways she hadn't before, the tilt of his head when he thought, the small gestures of kindness he offered without being asked, the way he laughed softly when he felt comfortable, the sincerity in his eyes that seemed to reach out to her without words. She began to feel a strange combination of maternal affection and an emotional pull that was difficult to ignore, a thrilling awareness of closeness that both comforted and unsettled her. Jake, on his part, seemed more present than ever, his usual teenage distractions fading when Emma was near, leaning into conversation, sharing his thoughts, his fears, his small dreams for the future, as if he were seeking not just a stepmother's guidance, but someone who truly saw him, understood him, and valued his presence. One rainy evening, they found themselves alone in the living room while the rest of the family was out visiting friends. The rain tapped lightly against the windows, creating a quiet, intimate atmosphere that seemed to invite honesty and vulnerability. They sat side by side on the sofa, talking softly about life, music, school, and the small things that mattered to them, the way one talks when they feel safe and free of judgment. Emma realized how much she enjoyed these moments, how they made her feel alive in a way she hadn't in years, a deep emotional resonance that was both comforting and slightly intoxicating. Jake hesitated, then admitted quietly, "I feel like I can tell you anything, like you actually get me." Emma's heart skipped a beat at the simple truth of his words, realizing that the bond they shared had deepened into a rare, unspoken intimacy, a connection built on trust, understanding, and emotional closeness that neither could ignore. She found herself leaning into the conversation, sharing small vulnerabilities she had never voiced before, memories from her own youth, moments of fear, moments of joy, all wrapped in the warmth of a quiet evening where they were alone, safe, and attentive to one another. Every small gesture, the way Jake handed her a cup of tea, the brief touch of their hands while moving pillows, the laughter they shared over a minor spill, felt charged with subtle meaning, a silent acknowledgement of the closeness that had grown between them. Emma struggled with her feelings, constantly reminding herself of the boundaries she could not cross, of the family she loved, of the role she had to maintain, yet she could not deny the thrill of connection, the way her chest tightened at his smiles, the warmth that spread through her when he looked at her with trust and curiosity. Jake, too, seemed aware of the emotional tension, though he didn't yet understand it fully, sensing the affection and care in Emma's eyes, the way she listened, the way she laughed at his jokes, the subtle encouragement she gave him, and feeling drawn to her in ways he couldn't quite define. That evening stretched on, the rain outside creating a cocoon of privacy, and Emma felt the delicate balance of desire and restraint, a recognition of attraction that was emotional, heartfelt, and profoundly human, yet entirely appropriate in its purity. She noticed herself imagining what it would feel like to hold him close, to comfort him through every fear, to be a presence he could rely on no matter what, but quickly reminded herself that love could take many forms and that sometimes the deepest bonds were emotional rather than physical. Jake's voice, soft and earnest, cut through her thoughts when he asked, "Do you ever feel like people don't really notice the little things you do?" Emma nodded, understanding completely, and for a moment they sat in silence, the unspoken emotions filling the space between them, their hearts beating a little faster in the quiet intimacy of recognition and care. Every story shared, every glance exchanged, every small act of attention became a thread weaving them closer together, a tapestry of connection that was delicate, tender, and quietly thrilling. Emma realized she was learning more about herself in these moments, about patience, about empathy, about feeling deeply without needing to act impulsively, about loving responsibly yet fully. And Jake, in turn, was discovering his own heart, navigating feelings of admiration, trust, and emotional attachment that were new, intense, and exciting, yet entirely respectful of the unspoken boundaries between them. That evening ended with a quiet moment by the fireplace, the soft glow of the flames illuminating their faces, the warmth in the room matching the emotional warmth they shared. Emma felt a mixture of exhilaration and fear, exhilaration at the closeness they had cultivated, fear of the emotional complexity it brought, yet above all, an unshakable sense that their bond was rare and meaningful, a quiet romance of hearts and minds intertwined in subtle, powerful ways. As Jake helped her clear the last dishes and they exchanged a lingering glance, Emma realized that this week, this evening, this shared vulnerability had shifted everything. Their relationship, though unchanged in title, had grown into something more profound, a mutual understanding, emotional intimacy, and tender longing that neither could fully articulate but both felt in every shared moment. And as she watched him leave the kitchen, a small, thoughtful smile on his face, she felt a deep ache of affection, an unspoken awareness that life had given them an extraordinary connection, one that would remain quietly alive in their hearts, charged with subtle tension, romantic undertones, and the beauty of unspoken longing, leaving them both restless, thoughtful, and yearning for the next moment of closeness, the next shared secret, the next heartbeat that reminded them that love, in all its forms, often blooms in moments that are delicate, tender, and impossible to ignore. The days that followed were filled with a quiet, electric tension between Emma and Jake, a rhythm of connection that neither spoke about but both felt in every glance, every gesture, every shared moment that seemed ordinary to anyone else but extraordinary to them. They had fallen into an unspoken pattern, moments of laughter over breakfast, brief conversations in the kitchen, helping each other with chores, or simply sitting in the living room sharing stories about their day, each small interaction charged with emotional intimacy, subtle longing, and the thrill of being understood by someone who truly saw them. Emma noticed how Jake's presence filled her days in ways she hadn't expected. She became aware of the warmth of his smile, the gentleness in his voice, the sincerity in his questions, and the way he leaned into her attention without even realizing it, creating moments that were tender, heartfelt, and quietly romantic in their emotional depth. Jake, for his part, seemed to mirror her attentiveness, offering thoughtful gestures, lingering a moment longer when handing her a dish, sharing a quiet joke that only they understood, or pausing to listen to her in a way that made her feel seen, appreciated, and emotionally alive. Even the smallest interactions became meaningful, the brush of hands while passing a book, a fleeting glance across the room, the way they sometimes caught each other's eye during routine tasks, each moment infused with a gentle, unspoken connection that neither could ignore. Emma was aware of the tension, a thrill that coursed through her chest and warmed her heart, yet she also remained grounded, reminding herself constantly of her responsibility as a stepmother, of the family she loved, and of the need to respect boundaries, while simultaneously cherishing the deep emotional bond that had grown between them. She found herself thinking about Jake even when they were apart, recalling the way he laughed, the way his eyes lit up when he shared something important to him, the quiet vulnerability he displayed that made her want to nurture, protect, and encourage him in ways that were tender and wholesome but undeniably intimate. One evening, the family went out for a small weekend trip, leaving the house quiet and still, and Emma and Jake found themselves alone for the first time in hours without the usual distractions. They sat in the living room, the dim glow of the lamps casting soft shadows across their faces, and spoke openly about dreams, fears, and personal hopes they had never discussed before, creating a space that was charged with honesty, emotional vulnerability, and a quiet, mature sense of affection that neither fully understood but both cherished. Emma felt a flutter in her chest as she realized how much she cared for him, not just as her stepson but as a young man growing into himself, someone whose presence brought her comfort, joy, and a profound sense of connection. Jake, equally aware of the moment, hesitated but spoke honestly, sharing feelings of admiration, gratitude, and a deep, unspoken attachment that made them both acutely aware of the fragile, tender intimacy between them. They laughed softly at shared memories, exchanged meaningful glances, and for a brief while, time seemed suspended, leaving them suspended in a delicate balance of longing, care, and emotional closeness that felt both thrilling and safe. Emma reminded herself that love could take many forms, that attraction could be emotional rather than physical, and that the bond they shared was special precisely because it was about understanding, trust, and genuine affection, restrained by the respect they had for one another and the boundaries of their family. Even as she felt the warmth of longing, the subtle thrill of being truly connected to another human being, she knew this was a story of hearts touching, of emotions weaving together quietly, and of the magic of silent understanding that can form between two people in unexpected ways. Jake, thoughtful and sensitive, seemed to grow more confident, more aware of the emotional depth of their relationship, yet never overstepping, always returning to the safety and respect that Emma embodied, which made the connection even more profound, authentic, and heartfelt. Together, they navigated a new rhythm of life, moments of laughter and conversation, quiet evenings filled with stories and shared understanding, and the comforting knowledge that they mattered deeply to one another, even without words. Emma began to see herself in a new light, realizing that emotional intimacy could be as thrilling as romance, that connection could make her feel alive, seen, and appreciated in ways that went far beyond simple family roles. She cherished the small notes of thoughtfulness Jake left, the quiet attentiveness in his actions, and the way he seemed to instinctively know when she needed encouragement, support, or a moment of understanding, all of which created a sense of companionship and emotional fulfillment she hadn't realized she had been missing. The week ended with them sharing a quiet evening together, sipping tea in the living room while the rain fell softly outside, listening to the comforting rhythm of droplets against the windows, and Emma felt a mixture of contentment, longing, and emotional exhilaration, aware that this bond was rare, delicate, and entirely meaningful. In that serene moment, she looked at Jake and felt a profound appreciation for their unspoken connection, the quiet romance of hearts meeting in subtle, respectful ways, and the bittersweet awareness that love often blossoms in emotional intimacy, tender understanding, and the quiet thrill of being truly known. She realized that their relationship, though unchanged in title, had become something extraordinary, a shared space of emotional honesty, mutual admiration, gentle longing, and heartfelt care that neither could replicate elsewhere. And as she watched him glance at her with trust and warmth, she understood that this was the story of a unique connection, one that was romantic in its emotional depth, profoundly moving, and beautifully restrained, leaving both of them with hearts full of tenderness, minds occupied with shared moments, and an enduring sense of longing that would remain quietly alive in their everyday lives, reminding them that the most powerful love stories often unfold in subtle glances, shared laughter, and the unspoken understanding that two hearts can meet and resonate deeply even without words, without crossing lines, and without ever needing to act on physical desire, because the emotional bond they shared was enough to make life richer, more meaningful, and profoundly beautiful in its quiet, heartfelt way.